What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the show. In movie reviews tonight, I am discussing Final Destination. We got the latest entry in the Final Destination franchise after 14 long years. Final Destination Bloodlines coming out here real soon. So I thought we were going to take a look at a couple of the most important entries of this long-running, death-filled franchise. Let's not waste any more time, though, and jump right on into things here. If you haven't seen the trailer for Final Destination 1 before, this tells the story of a young man getting set to leave on his senior trip to France. He has a premonition of his plane's destruction and manages to get himself and 6 others off before his vision comes true. Unfortunately for the survivors, death doesn't plan on letting them go so easily and begins to hunt them down in gruesome ways. And there it is, folks. That is Final Destination 1. You know, over 11 years, they put out 5 entries, with Bloodlines set to be the 6th one. And one of the smartest things about this franchise is the fact that it's surrounding death, so they can kill off literally everybody and not have to worry about bringing the same cast members back from one entry to the next. It makes it a very inexpensive franchise to shoot. You don't have to get wrapped up in the mythology and the lore, because the only thing we have to worry about is what is Death's design, and according to whatever movie we're watching, what's the way of stopping that. The original film is unique compared to a lot of these other films because it's taken at such a different tone. It's taken far more seriously than a lot of the other movies. I enjoy the rest of the franchise, even the Final Destination. I enjoy all of those movies, but I very much think that if you look at the other films that have come out, they are very much played up, a little bit more comedic, a little bit more humor in there than this original film has. It's almost like the idea of almost dying didn't actually scare these people enough to like live their lives a bit more cautiously. And in this first film, we see the grief, the PTSD, the terror that these characters are still living with after getting out of their near-death experience. Now, again, all of this revolves around an averted plane crash. And it's interesting to look at the first like 20-30 minutes of this film and see just how X-Files coded it truly is. You know, Jeffrey Reddick, who wrote this script, originally intended this to be a spec script for the X-Files. And when New Line bought the script, and director James Wong and Glenn Morgan were brought on to do a rewrite to produce it, those two had already been in bed with X-Files at that point. So you have 3 voices that are all aiming for an X-Files kind of feel here, and it definitely comes off that way. The way we're introduced to Devon Sawa's Alex Browning, setting up of the situation, the original premonition, getting them all off, the plane crash, the FBI agents being introduced, all of that just so feels like an X-Files episode. Like the only thing we are really missing is Mulder and Scully being the FBI agents that end up showing up. And granted, the rest of the film, you know, kind of draws that back, because obviously if we were watching an X-Files episode, we'd be more focused on what the FBI is doing as opposed to following along the extra protagonist who's involved heavily in their case that they're on. And as we're focused on Alex, obviously, we're not going to get more of those vibes that we would get. But watch it again and actually really pay attention to it. Maybe watch an X-Files episode beforehand. You will absolutely feel like you're watching an episode of the show. And that's one of the great successes here of this film, is that just adds such a far more serious tone that I think needs to be here in order to take the film seriously. I think it works out so well. That means that we can enjoy the characters a bit more and actually take them at face value. I think that throughout the rest of the franchise, we get a lot of caricatures of what these characters really should be. Humans responding to avoiding a near-death experience and now being hunted down by death again. All that has been super interesting, but here in this first film, we're actually given a little bit more with that. In addition to this, Death actually feels like an active participant in everything that's going on, too. There is the death scene with Todd, the one that gets killed in the shower, to where we see the liquid coming out from behind the toilet, and then after Todd dies, the liquid goes back up. And that's a narrative choice, because it's like, if we move that liquid, then it removes it from being an accident. And that is the narrative of the movie, is that Todd killed himself, but if that liquid is there, it's suddenly an accident. And it's like, well, nobody's going to catch death, so what is the point of it? It's a silly little, like, a little tidbit to have in there. You know, and this is the only film to where death actually feels like a physical participant in all of this as well. It's weird. It's a weird comparison to make, but I almost saw it a bit like The Frighteners, almost the way that death is portrayed. And you remember Jake Busey's character in that, who was one of the killers of the film, is wearing like the big, the Grim Reaper hood and got the sickle and everything. And we don't actually see the real ghost that's under all of that till later on in the film. And death honestly felt a little bit like The Frighteners, a little bit here in Final Destination. Most of the characters actually catch a glimpse of depth at some point in here, and not only that, death covers its tracks as well too, most specifically with Todd's death in the bathroom towards the beginning. You know, the rest of the characters in the movie are led to believe that Todd killed himself. Obviously Alex knows otherwise and that death is doing all of this, but we see that Death moves in the liquid into the bathroom so that Todd actually slips into the shower cable and ends up killing himself. But even though he didn't do it, whatever. But then he sends the liquid back away after Todd's dead, covering its tracks. So this is something that Death hasn't done in any of these other films. You know, it doesn't go back and move screws or get rid of water or get rid of ladders that have fallen down. It doesn't do any of that at all. So it really feels like Death is actually involved in this. And not only that, but Death actually has feelings too. Like it's responding to some of the anger that's being hurled its way. And that does make it much more serious in tone compared to all the other films that we're getting. You know, I remember renting this in the fall of 2000 or getting my parents to rent this. And it was one of the first films that I remember seeing to where I understood we didn't need like an actual killer. We didn't need an actual monster or a ghost or anything like that for a horror film to truly be scary. There's other ways to evoke that fear and terror out of people. And this was an absolute effective one. Now, of course, as the series has blown up, the interesting thing about the other entries has been the elaborate deaths in them. And that is another big difference between this film and the subsequent ones we get. You know, the rest of the films turn into these Rube Goldberg pieces to where there's these elaborate setups that end up paying off in somebody being killed. And I'm not saying that that's not happening here in this film at all. It most definitely does. Case in point with Mrs. Luden's death, to where you know, she's dropping the liquid and the fire starts and the monitor blows up and the knife drops down. Like, that's probably the most elaborate one in the film, but in the rest of the franchise, that's a pretty common thing that all these elaborate death setups get done. And so I like the fact that with a lot of these other deaths, it's something very, very simple. Hey, your car's not starting, seatbelt's not going to unlatch. Hey, a piece of metal flew out and cuts dude's head off. Hey, a shower cable wraps around your neck, you get hung to death. I like that most of these are so simple that we never ever have to question that as, oh, who actually was behind all of the. I like that these deaths are so incredibly simple. It's just Death trying to close this loop out. Death doesn't need to go through all this stuff in order to kill these people. It just needs them dead. So it's going for something simple in a lot of these cases. This is still such an effective film. It is not my favorite in the franchise, to be completely honest. I think that it has the best characters, and I think the tone of this film is better than any of the other entries that we get. And it is very interesting that as much as I like Final Destination 5, which links directly back to this movie, it still feels like worlds apart from, again, how this original film truly does. I just find that so interesting. But yet and still, this movie is not my favorite in the franchise. Y'all get to find that out a little bit later this week here when I drop the review for that specific Final Destination, which I've said on the show before. And if you know, you could say it in the comment section. But I'm curious, y'all let me know in the comment section how you felt about the original Final Destination. Is this one that you got to see in theaters originally when it was out? Did you rent it on VHS when it was in its original release as well too? And is it your favorite of the franchise? Let me know, because I am so curious about how y'all feel about this film on the eve of Bloodlines coming out. And of course, get subscribed to my link tree at linktr.ee/T Scary Movie. If you get subscribed, that's going to give you access to the YouTube page for the video versions of the show, your favorite podcasting platforms for the audio-only versions of the show, my Letterboxd page for written reviews and movie rankings through the year, my TikTok page for movie reviews, movie news, and movie premieres, my Twitch page for horror gaming, and my Fangoria shop page for a 20% discount off anything in the Fangoria shop. Take advantage of that, y'all. Hit that subscribe button, especially if you're watching here on YouTube. We got a lot of great reviews coming out for you here soon. We're going to be talking about the pilot episode of the horror trivia game show, Better Luck Than Chuck. We are still going to be finishing up the season 2 of Last of Us. We are talking Borderline, The Bondsman, Final Destination, Bloodlines. Bring her back. We got so much stuff coming. I don't want you to miss any of that. Hit that subscribe button, y'all. And that is it for me tonight. My name is T. We'll be talking scary movies. Stay scared.